Africa does not need to remain here. We need to develop Africa. There are several factors which work against Africa. For example, the international financial infrastructure has worked very much against Africa, because African countries have been made to borrow money at a very high rate of interest compared to other countries of the same status as the African countries. So we need to address the issue of rearranging the international financial infrastructure. That is, I think, one of the major starting points. Now, Africa is the richest continent on the planet Earth in terms of raw materials. But it's a paradox that Africa also is the poorest in terms of living conditions. You said that we need not remain for perpetually the source of raw materials for industrial west or east. That we need to do value addition to raw materials which are coming out of Africa before we export them. And then we've also seen
easy some treasons over there. He's saying pretty much what most people already know, educated people especially. And this is exactly also what our President William Ruto has been talking about, how we need to review the financial, what's the word that he
infrastructure.
No, he in fact uses another word. But pretty much financial infrastructure between Africa and the West. For me, I feel like Raila shouldn't shy away from mentioning how what is killing Africa is Western imperialism. Just go straight to the point.
Yeah.
You feel me? That is exactly what caused the quote-unquote the coups in West Africa. That's one of the reasons even Gen Zs got out in large numbers, because we generally feel like we're not a sovereign continent, let alone a sovereign state, being Kenya. You know what I mean? So here, Raila was talking about resolving conflict in Africa. Have a listen.
Nations Security Council. That's your question.
Whose aspiration to silence guns by 2020, conflicts persist. How will you foster African solutions to ensure effective and durable conflict prevention, management, and resolution? And how do you plan to accelerate Africa's push for a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council? Ladies and gentlemen, 4 minutes, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Well, silencing the guns on the continent. As you know that in 2013, the EU met and passed a resolution to silence the guns by 2020. We are today in 2024, and the guns are not silent. They're very loud, roaring all over the continent. The issue is we need to address the causative factors of these conflicts. There are some which are conflict caused by poverty or deprivation. Some of them by conflict within the society, again, things like ethnicity and so on. Some of them are externally influenced or promoted. Some are religious and so on. So they're not a common factor. But what you need to do is to address the causative factors which could translate into these conflicts throughout the continent. And this is what I will do myself. First, as you know that all African countries are not at the same levels of development. Those which are more developed, like for example in terms of governance, there are some areas where you have got exclusions of people, and as a result of this, there's some people move to use other means. We need to find a way of creating an environment or dialogue within our societies so that we can be able to prevent these differences, conflict ending up into violent confrontation between the various groups. We don't need to put a time span, but I'm sure that it is possible to end these conflicts and stop the guns by 35, in my view. The other one is the issue of Africa's representation on the Security Council. This is something that's been long overdue. As you know, that the UN was formed at a time when most part of Africa were colonies. And that's why the UN structure as today does not deal with the realities of the world today. And the situation where you have 5 countries sitting in the Security Council with veto powers, and Africa is not represented, a continent with 1.4 billion people, is not tenable and it's not accessible. And that's why I'm not going to talk about Africa's representation, but we're going to insist that Africa must get 2 permanent seats in the UN Security Council. This is only fair, because we are a continent of 55 sovereign nations. We cannot be excluded when Europe has got 3 permanent representations on the Security Council.
All right, so there you go. That's Raila Odinga, the former Prime Minister, talking about some of the things Africa needs to do to resolve its, oh my God, it's ongoing conflict for decades on, probably even centuries. And what do you think, my brother?
Well, a few things there that I've been thinking about. One is what he's talked about. Africa, we have an unfair global financial infrastructure. Our president actually spoke about it when he was at the African Union as well. Yes. Because that's why we are actually stuck in debt. We borrow money and then our interest rates are always higher. Yeah. So these guys control us through that. If we can get out of that system where we borrow money on a different level than other countries, especially we are we are third world countries where they're giving us higher interest rates than international countries like the US and whichever other country that borrows money, internationally. So I think that's a strong pointer. If Africans can improve on that, it'll be a very good thing for us in the whole of Africa. Yeah.
That's actually true, man. That's actually very true. Yeah. For me, I think poverty, I know poverty, obviously one of the main reasons is so much conflict in Africa, but it's not the only one. In fact, to me, it's very, it probably doesn't even I'm trying to find the right words, but anyway, let me just go straight to the point. You see, every time Western nations usually get into African spaces, African countries, and they talk about that, we'll give you guys aid in order to help you guys sort out all your problems. Trust you me, that aid rarely helps. You know what I mean? And in fact, it just creates some sort of scramble for all this quote-unquote aid by African countries. Yeah. So I feel like, to me, I genuinely feel the reason there's so much conflict in Africa is simply because of the presence of imperial Western nations in our countries, and they're the ones who set the agenda. They go. We know whatever happened in the northern part of Africa. We know whatever happened in even Somalia area. The northeastern part of course, this region of ours. Whatever happened in West Africa. Yeah, Raila has to just be real. He has to have that Trump energy. Throw away that speech. Call a spade a spade. That's what's going to resonate with most African youth right now. True. But other than that, I feel like this whole speech of his is so scripted, to be honest, and I don't think it's impressive to listen to, especially when it comes to this younger generation of Africans.
There's actually some things that he mentioned, whereas one was the financial infrastructure, the other thing was Africa is a rich country with a rich continent, which is very, very true. However, he forgot to highlight the most important part, was that most African countries don't like to share with each other, especially when it comes to opportunities. Like we saw in South Africa, where they had xenophobia, where they didn't want their own black people they're working because they thought they were taking jobs, where in Kenya we give higher payments towards people like Uganda when they're getting their oil because they don't have a port. But if we actually take advantage of the resources that we have and decide to share them, we'll actually reduce the amount of inflation that we have, the amount of rates that we're getting, interest rates.
Yeah, we need a borderless Africa at this point. Yeah, and I've actually heard stories about William Ruto really being at the forefront of this conversation when it comes to East African, geopolitics. So you never know. Maybe during the Ruto's reign, we could have a borderless Eastern Africa. You just never know. Yeah, but I'm hoping for the best. We're looking forward to, Yeah, and
the last point with the financial infrastructure, I feel like he should have just called out the fact that most African countries face one problem in common, and that's corruption.
Yeah.
And that is the main reason why we get high interest rates, is because when we borrow the money, we don't do what is meant to do. And so he should have just called out the fact that, we should work on that as individual countries, and also what he's planning to do to be able to break that system and break that mentality in people when he comes there representing the whole of Africa.
Yeah. Do you know, maybe the only thing I feel like most guys want to listen to? Yeah? This thing for neocolonialism.
Yeah, like I need a leader who's going to go there and say that we are trying to stop the strong grip of international these main countries having a grip on Africa, the same way these Senegalese guys did, the Mali did, Niger. Go there and say, right now we want to unhook all colonies from our African countries. We want to use our own minerals to help us. We want to sell our own products at our own terms. Those are things that we want to hear, because we know what's going on in all these countries. We have other people having a grip on other countries.
They have an unfair advantage.
Yeah, so
it's as easy as that.
Yeah, we don't want that.
Yeah, and that's the thing I don't feel like he's mentioning on his speech, man. I don't know why he's playing.
I wish he'd go off script.
Man.
And speak Swa.
Throw that speech away.
Like Sasa.
After those guys get a translator and you speak your language and give out that, talk your talk.
Besides, see, it's Arab and Swahili that's the most commonly used languages in Africa.
Speak Swa.
Keep it real.
And say, listen, actually, this is what I think, to be honest. And I think that will...
Because I feel like right now he's addressing the Muzungus. He's not really addressing African people.
Yeah. Or maybe just, using the power of English sometimes. It just doesn't help you that much. Especially when you're with your home guys.
Of course.
Be local. Yeah. Go local.
Bro, the only reason there's conflict in Africa is because of the presence of these guys over here. We'll call it whatever you want to call it, manze. You know what I mean? There is no way any Western imperial nation is going to get to your country and you guys will thrive. Never. They usually burn down countries.
They're coming to inject our cows and all that. Speak it there.
Call us. by tomorrow morning, Rao will be already president of the EU. Whatever.
Like, this is what we're talking about.
This thing is easy.
Yeah. One thing, our president is very smart, William Ruto. When he went to the AU, he told them, let's also form an African Court of Justice. You see, African leaders, when they hear that there's going to be an African Court of Justice and we get away from the issues of The Hague, they feel like, okay, this is a solution. These guys are always calling us to their countries to do International Criminal Court, blah, blah, blah. This is, you have to impact them in a way where they know, okay, for real, this is going to help us in a better way, no matter how it is.
Then, it's interesting how he says, Africa is the richest continent in the world.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the richest.
That's the part. What are you going to do?
No. Okay, it's rich. Cool, we accept.
Where is that money?
And because of that, say it. We don't need aid. Say it, man.
Yeah. Because if you're going to be in an African Union conference and you're still going to be there pampering and trying to feel like, the Western world, we're still homies. If you keep them as homies on that platform,
at dialogue.
You
heard him say dialogue,
We don't want to hear dialogue. We want those guys to chomoka. They leave.
We need some of those 99
what are we talking about? We know everything.
We want to start hearing things like cross trade. Like, why are we getting oil from, from other countries, Russia, from UAE? Why can't we get it from Nigeria? Yet they mine it.
Man, it's crazy. Anyway, so, because of that, now I'm going to hook you guys up with that crazy tune by Nas, Damian Marley, and K9. It's called Africa Must Wake Up.
Let's wake up.
Yeah, Dano.
24/7 around the world, non-stop. This is SpiceFM.